Good evening, everyone. This is Shoaib Zaidi. You are watching 72 News. And the news is this is the last show of year 2020. And we would like to discuss how year 2020 went. I'd like to thanks to my panel, Professor Grant Pitman. Thank you very much, sir. Ultimately, you always with us and always we learn something. Our viewers, they understand something new from you. And we would like to welcome Dr. Bernard Malik. Last show, we truly miss him. Definitely, we enjoy talking solo show. But again, Dr. Bernard Malik shorts is always best shows. Okay, you can't miss. Thank you, Dr. Bernard Malik.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Bernard, today we would like to, just to discuss and see how year 2020 went. We would like to cover many stories, but again, because of the time constraint, so from the bushfire, then royal families, then Queensland election, then US election, and in the end, we might discuss about the a beautiful and then failure victory from India in cricket. So ultimately, we are going to have a discussion with different topics. Let's start year 2020, last show with Professor Pitman. Professor Pitman, bushfire. It was a horrible period, and we started here with the bushfire. Do you think that with this bushfire, the systems already have a rescue plan, emergency plans in place? You've been part of the emergency system policy and procedure, and because bushfire is uncontrolled, unexpected things which can happen any times. So with this year, what we learned, what the system has learned, and what do you think they were ready? And then failure was okay, or it can be reduced with more proper working?
The Royal Commission into bushfires has just recently been released, and although I haven't read all of it, parts of it seem to indicate a greater emphasis on preparedness. We weren't really prepared for the bushfire,
right.
And I think there will be a greater emphasis and expenditure on preparing our communities for bushfires. And I think the other factor which came through in the Royal Commission was better coordination between the state and the federal government. So I think the lessons we've learned is that we need to probably put more monies into being prepared for bushfires. And I think from the federal and state government, better coordination in the use of resources between the two levels of government. So there's other recommendations, but that seems to be the heavy emphasis. And so over the next couple of years, I think there will be better resources put into the rural sector for bushfires.
Right. I'll get back to you on the same topic and see that exactly what the institute was expecting from the Royal Commission report. And again, I know that it does not came, but does it really going to indicate the failures of the system? Dr. Bernard Malik, you are one of the system owners. They support the community in a different manner, different ways, different practices. And again, when bushfire came, you also have many plans for the providing the foods, looking the resources. Do you think that arrangement which came from the individual business owners, supporters, fundraisers is enough for such kind of requirement? Or do you think that from the sponsors also we would like to encourage and enhance the awareness?
Thank you, Mr. Zaidi. Anytime there is a human tragedy, everybody needs to pitch in terms of the resources, whether money or manpower.
Right.
Luckily, the governments in Western countries, especially Australia and other developed countries, are so well equipped, but they still need to use the agency of human beings. And when community comes together to support it, yes, there are no two ways. In terms of loss, 34 people died in bushfires and 3 billion animals died. And 45,000 acres got burned. that was massive loss in terms of wildlife and human life. 34 people died. In these countries, if you recall, 2 people died in fighting fire, and the Prime Minister had to come back from Hawaii, where he was on holidays, fly back, leave his family there. This country is not like our countries, especially I can speak with a lot of authority in India. We have had over 100,000 people dead, and government is more interested in building hospitals and building parliament and buying 8,000 crores worth of planes instead of building hospitals and providing better healthcare for people. In terms of small businesses, we are a small business, as Dr. Pitman can testify, but we always give out to the community. We gave $10,000 to the government at that time. And when Queensland flood happened, we had given $10,000 that time too. So every now and then, in times of human need, we pitch in whatever we can do.
So, the system, Malik Sahab, the system which the Queensland system or Australian-wide system, the federal system, does they have a kind of appreciation, the people when they are coming and appreciating, especially, you know, if you feel the pain and that's why, or you or anybody similar kind of. So do you think that system is in place when somebody is supporting these kind of problems, then they appreciate in a different forms?
Look, anytime the tragedy is of that magnanimity, government, however well equipped it is, gets overwhelmed. So small little hands, yes, always help, and government is very appreciative. I remember it didn't happen this time because we went to COVID pretty much same time as we were going through fire and settlement.
Yes.
During floods, when Queensland floods happened, I had given, at that time we were very new college, and $10,000 was like $1 billion for us. At that time also I gave $10,000, and then Premier had gotten all the donors, big donors together, and she hosted a dinner. That was a sign of appreciation after the floods.
Right. Professor Pitman, the question which I already shared with you regarding the Royal Commission, one of my viewers, they also put the questions because in our system, there is no concept of the Royal Commission. So I would like from you to explain a little bit about how the Royal Commission system works, how much is independent and how much is accountable, and then what is the expectation from the Royal Commission in case in the report of the bushfire.
Royal Commissions in Australia are formed out of legislation. In this case, the federal government has an act of parliament which allows them to set up a Royal Commission. And a Royal Commission is basically a commission which has terms of reference. Terms of reference are the objectives and the issues they want them to look at and consider, and come up with some recommendations as to how the system has failed, or if there were some legal issues or whatever it is that they've identified. And the Royal Commission generally is chaired by a judge, can be a state or federal judge, usually has some members on the commission, usually people who have some expertise in the area. And it's held very similar to a court hearing where legal counsel can present cases of issues affecting, in this case, the bushfire, and members of the public can make submissions, the media can make submissions, so anybody can make a submission. I believe there was hundreds of submissions made on the bushfire, and it can range from government making submissions to the local resident whose house burnt down making a submission. And then after they've heard the evidence and material, they present a report to government on their findings from the inquiry and their recommendations. And generally speaking, the government would then consider the recommendations and develop policy, financial infrastructure, or legislation to deal with the recommendations to improve the systems or policies or whatever they've identified in the Royal Commission.
Right. Here, something is coming up that, okay, in our system, the system from our country is like that. Whenever some report is coming, they always go back and find the blame game, you know. However, in what I understand from you, that you trying to explain that the Royal Commission report, whatever finding they have the very, clear and fine findings. And most of the time it used to learn for the future, for the improvement in the system, not for the blame game. So what happening in the developed country like Australia?
Sometimes Royal Commissions can look at blame games, and that can lead to civil litigation. But generally speaking, their terms of reference set out clearly what they wanted to address. And majority of times it's looking at the legislation, the policy, the government operations in terms of how they've handled, in this case, the bushfire. And every state and federal government has an Emergency Management Act, and generally they follow 4 principles. One is on prevention, the second one is on preparedness, the third one is on response, and the fourth one is on recovery. So the Royal Commission, broad coverage would have been in those 4 areas. So the government may have been criticised for failing to address preparedness, putting money into more aircraft, more fire engines, more rural fire brigade, and so on and so on. So the government's response, which will occur in the next few months, may be to put more policy or legislation into place that they will expend more money into putting more aircraft, more fire engines, more staff into rural areas, for example.
Right. Mr. Malik, we are in the end of the year, and then farmer protest also at this stage and highest at the peak level. Now, when we're discussing about the bushfire, it is one concept also discussed among the people that bushfire happens because the land is getting dry, the weather is getting hot, and again, it is linked indirectly or linked with the farmers' efforts and green energy and green environment. How you are looking the bushfire from this side?
Look, most of the bushfires are actually human errors or caused by human errors.
Right.
Of course, you have to also go by the weather. The weather here is very dry this time of the year. It doesn't rain much, the wood gets dry. And if you really go to the bushes here, you would realize it's very, very dry. Very dry. Yeah, you could just fall there and your pants could cause fire. It's that dry. And of course, when it catches fire, then it just travels beyond control and it does cause a lot of damage.
Right. Mr. Malik, when year 2020 started, people say that because the numbers 2020, many good things happened. This year is going to be very different than any other years. So many, but exactly how you are looking at the end of the year, how does the overall the year 2020 went? We will go to the second chapter after this.
Look, just to quote your words, you said everybody said it's a good year and many things would happen.
Yeah.
I think it's a good year because we are alive. As you would know, there have been 751,000 deaths that would not have happened otherwise if Chinese virus had not happened.
Right. So you are American, and so you are using the same terminology of American Chinese virus, huh?
Yes. So that is good thing we are alive. I know a lot of people that I know have gone through it within my family. Even my son has coronavirus today. Considering that, a lot of things happened. Yes, this year has been very challenging. Whoever thought that people would be locked up home for weeks and weeks? Nobody thought, because we all love freedom. Try to tell your son, stay home one day, don't go out. And you know what a challenge it is for you to keep him home one day and then for him not to go out. And here people happily stayed for days and weeks and perhaps months at time. So there many things happen. In terms of human tragedy, you saw the worst, and in terms of human nobility, you also saw the best. People came out and helped people.
Right. Professor Pitman, now start up here, as I already shared with Dr. Bernard, that expectation because of the number, the expert number, the people of the expert number experts, they always find some good things there, but actually it does not. Now coming back to the COVID, it was, let's say, because your roots are very strong, knowledge is very much good. Similarly, Dr. Bernard also. Do you think that in COVID, looking, because many people discuss COVID in a differently, we discuss also, but today in the last show of the year, we would like to know that summary of the COVID. Did it has a lesson from the God or some authorities for rest of the world that whatever you can do it, I still have the sting in my hand?
I was a district disaster coordinator for Queensland during the SARS outbreak.
Right.
Back, 15, 20 years ago. And Queensland has also had a couple of other outbreaks dealing with bats. So we're used to having some viruses here from animals over the last several decades. And history's shown us that about every 100 years we have a major divily with a virus from animals.
Right.
So it's like a book I read many years ago, Lessons Unlearned. Our generation never learned from the lessons from previous generations, probably because our leadership are a different group of people, but we don't tend to learn from history very well. And I think what COVID has done has woken us up to that history shows that we do have viruses in the world. China had it. SARS, they said, came from Asia. The bat one came from Queensland. So we're prone to viruses, and we're perhaps not well prepared for handling it because we don't learn from the lessons in the past.
In the past, yeah.
And I think if we understood that, we'd be better off. And I think it's interesting that 2020 is a term used by eye specialists to refer to myopic views. And one of the things we should learn is that myopic is short term or short distance. We should be looking at the long distance issues. In other words, we have it, what do we do with it, and how do we manage it over the next 3 to 5 years, and how does our society move on?
So you just share that you went with a emergency coordinator during the SARS. So and now like to learn from your lessons that okay, when you are emergency coordinator from that time, ultimately there was some outcomes or policy or procedures will be made. And do you think that many things was not done which was recommended during that time, and that's why we were not prepared?
Again, when you deal with disaster management, they always talk in 4 principles. Prevention, which is probably a little bit hard to deal with in viruses, but you certainly can have preparedness. And from the SARS virus to this one, I don't think we really learnt much. And we certainly learned a few basic lessons. And some of the players in Queensland are in positions from the SARS virus, like Dr. Young, the health officer, but there aren't too many other people. And when it comes to response, we had to develop it as we went along rather than using past experience or even exercise management, which we do a lot more of in this era. We don't document it. We don't have a doctrinal manual to refer to. we try to manage it as we go along. And then, of course, recovery is a whole new world that's opening up to us. And as Dr. Bernard said, there's the private sector providing benefits, and then the government sector. And one thing that we didn't do well was a lot of the money given by the private sector still hasn't been given in the recovery in bushfires because they didn't manage it well.
Right, right. Mr. Malik, lesson unlearned. So again, you are part of the management and you're running many different systems. In year 2020, COVID, handling the COVID, and as he already mentioned that during the SARS time, there was lesson unlearned. So do you think that every time when disaster happened, there is still many lessons which never be learned?
Look, every disaster is new. You never have repeat because the circumstances have changed. Heraclitus was a Greek philosopher who said you can never step into the same river twice because the water has changed, the circumstances have changed. Same way, every time there's disaster. So we have had so many viruses before. Why are we panicking? New methods are being employed. New drugs are being discovered. Flights have been cancelled to protect people. So new methods are being employed. So yes, there is a lot of learning and unlearning because the way you dealt last time with the tragedy or the way you dealt last time with what happened is not same way you will deal again.
Right, right. Dr. Bernard, you mentioned the Chinese virus also. Now look, this is again a conspiracy or I don't know about, but do you think that because of this virus and tag of this virus, the world economical cycle is going to be changed?
Oh, it has changed. That's interesting. You made that comment. One of the major events was 9th of March. March was one of the biggest month impacted by the loss at the stock market. So on one day, stock market suffered, Dow Jones suffered 2,300 points. That translates to, in Australia alone, $140 billion lost.
Right.
$140 billion lost in one day in Australia. In New York Stock Exchange, just one company called Apple's, the computer I'm using, the computer we're using, and the phones we use lost $100 billion in one day. Yes, economic losses have been great and disastrous. We got lucky staying in Australia, and my friends are so lucky to have stayed in US because government, untapped money like it was water.
Yes,
People
yes.
more money during that time than they would have gotten otherwise. But our countries, people were left to fend for themselves.
Right. Malik sir, there is a supplementary branch from this same question. Chinese virus, money control in China, and again, these losses go, ultimately there are from President Donald Trump that he stopped some product from the China. Now, do you think that China is going to be isolated in next year, something like that, or they will still have enough potential to control the economic of the world in their hand?
See, China has been always a perplex matter for me to think about and deal with. China was always notorious for its human rights record. And US, from President Clinton onwards, year after year gave them a preferred nation status. What that basically meant was that US would waive off a lot of duties on their imports. So basically, they could sell whatever they wanted to US without duty.
Right.
Yeah. So there was a major trade balance between US and China. If China was importing 1 billion, US was importing 20 billion. So China kept gaining money, became rich and rich, whereas US of course didn't get poor, but you fattened a cow that bites you back.
Right, right. Professor Pitman, I like because this concept responds from for China from an American, Indian, Australian national. What about you? How you're looking the Chinese economic cycle, and especially there is something going on with Australia also from the China. What exactly you are finding there?
Certainly, the Australian government and businesses are dealing with the Chinese industry side of things, including coal, grains, meats, wines, even lobsters. And I had a taste of lobsters for the first time because they were cheap and they couldn't send them to China. So we had lobsters here in Australia. So I think in trading, there are always multiple partner arrangements. And although the big partner may feel as though they're winning, there are always consequences. It's like today, and I'm a small-time purchaser from online. I was looking for products made in Australia that I could get in Australia because I wasn't sure if China could deliver it.
Yes.
So I ordered my product today from Australia in preference to China because I wanted to be secure in the knowledge that I could get it. And even though I may pay more, I was more interested in security of the services that I needed as against the cheaper price. So I think in Australia, we may pay more for security of our industry, but people may be prepared for that as against a cheap economy, which may or may not turn the tap off whenever they want to.
Right, right. Dr. Bernard Malik, let's move to the Queensland election. And again, this time the election result was much different than the expectation. And we had very good discussion, very good talks. How you look now in year 2020 when state election came and the control authority, how do you finding the Queensland election and year 2020?
Before the election, I think there was another major political event, if I may say that,
Yes.
that was impeachment of President Trump.
Yes.
See, the US doesn't impeach its presidents very often. And Trump was impeached. And in my own lifetime, I had seen another one being impeached was Clinton.
Clinton.
Yes. And interestingly, they both got impeached in the House and it never passed through the Senate. From that point, yes, that was a major event. And interestingly, President Trump almost won the election again after being impeached.
Right. So now, as long you started with the US election, so now year 2020 is finishing with the change of the power in USA, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And you believe, because I was reading some articles from USA, and they still says they are hoping that Donald Trump will try to be back.
Look, the way President Trump is acting, he thinks that he has won. The elections have been manipulated and there has been fraud played. He has his evidence. They have gone to Supreme Court. Supreme Court has been very selective and reserved in its acceptance of the cases. Yes, I think as far as if you remember, you wanted me to predict who would win. I had predicted President Trump would win. But I think President Trump won. He just lost it by himself. On that angle, now I think President-elect Biden will become president next month.
Right. So we're going to discuss 2021 in first show. Professor Pitman, we were discussing about the state election of the Queensland, but again, we would like to have some outcome about the Queensland US election. This is normally not a practice of US. Normally, whoever coming stays for 2 periods, not a one. This is normally it happens the way they control, the way they serve. how you're looking that the transfer of the power in US from Trump to Biden?
From an Australian perspective, we've always put the American politics probably on a higher level than Australia, because they stand for very sound principles. Their constitution is very sound. Their democracy is considered probably the soundest in the world. And I think what has shown up is the fragmentation that has occurred between two political parties, both on their constitutional values and their democratic processes. And I think a lot of people in Australia and perhaps the world are a little bit dismayed about the antics that have gone on, whereas we've always had high regard for the American political scene, and I know they've had their good times and their bad times with politicians, but generally America is the country we look to for democracy, for human values, for all that is good in democracy. And I think there are people who are probably disappointed. Here in the Queensland election, I think what's coming more and more obvious is Australian people are not as sympathetic to the two-party policy system that we have, and are quick to vote for alternative parties now. And I think, and there was a book I read many years ago called The Blind Eye of History, written by a Scottish historian called Charles Reith, who said that quite often when civilizations struggle, it's because the politics of the country becomes in its own right self-important as against the citizens and the democracy. And I think Queensland failed to identify that the citizens are the important element rather than the party politics and the bureaucratic and state politics. And I think more and more people are becoming disgruntled with the lack of genuine interest in what the citizens really think and believe and would like to see happen.
Right. Dr. Bernard, Malik, Professor Pitman mentioned two-party system. Again, you are very much politically involved and trying to engage Asian community from in the local system. You always appreciate engagement of the local in the political system or community services. How you are looking the two-party system? You've been from the US also. You already have a good experience in this country. How you're looking the two-party system?
I think the two-party system is very successful here. It works. It provides stability.
Right, but as Professor Pitman mentioned, the options are very limited.
Options are limited because people reject multi-party system here.
Right.
Even by people have tried. There are so many other smaller parties have tried, and they win individual seats or few seats, and then they get wiped out in the next election. Right. There are very few people that hang on year after year, like Greenies are coming up with few seats every now and then, and they've been successively able to increase their vote share.
Right.
One nation, yes, came in, and one nation's vote share decreased. Carter Party in Queensland, they have sustained their vote share for a number of years. But again, another party comes in when there is a major dissatisfaction with one of the parties. But here what happens is, if there is a dissatisfaction with the Liberals, they elect Labour, and if there is a major disappointment with the Labour, they elect Liberal.
Right. Malik sir, the conspiracy, now coming back, we are just end of our program, the conspiracy about the vaccine. How you think, what is your own opinion about the vaccine? When are you ready to have the vaccine? And do you think that really the vaccine is ready to serve the people, or still it need to be time, or there is a risk involved?
I think everything is up in the air at the moment.
Right.
Reason being, this vaccine is difficult to discover because First time you're dealing with a pandemic that is man-made. COVID-19 actually has been manufactured or created or generated in a human lab, and my understanding is generated to kill. So its long-term effect is it would kill people.
Right.
It's not easy. No, it's like you're trying to heal a guy who has taken poison. Yeah, there is antidote for poison, provided there is a timely action against it.
So as long it's created in the lab, the vaccine also created in the lab, and it has a treatment for such COVID.
Correct. So people take poison deliberately, but then there is antidote for the poison.
Right.
So you know when somebody gets it and if they get the right dot.
Professor Pitman, are you ready to have the vaccine, or you're still trying to research more?
17-year-old young man.
Yes. Okay. What is your opinion about? Are you ready with the Pfizer vaccine, or you have some other options, or you are still watch and wait?
I always have a policy not to buy the latest car off the assembly's line. I usually buy it a year or two later, just to see if they've sorted all the bugs out. I think the advantage Australia has is that America and UK would have had about a good 6 months before we have it, 4 to 6 months. So hopefully the bugs will be sorted out by then.
Wonderful.
Will I have a vaccine? Well, I've had flu vaccinations for the last 30 or 40 years. I've had HIV vaccination, so I've been vaccinated for everything else. And I definitely have my will in place if anything happens.
You are very well prepared for the vaccine. So you already have will in place. Now let's see, we discussed so much dry and serious topic. Let's close out with the cricket. Professor Pitman, did you see any team that won in a one game? They generated a record of history.
I can't hear you. What are you talking?
Me and no, Dr. Malik, I did not close. And then the second game, they win from the same people without Kohli. How you're looking these team? I don't like to discuss about the Australian team, the courage, the response. You know, how do you rate it?
Look, I'm a cricket follower since I was a young boy, and watch most tests between Australia and other countries. And the first test was certainly a bowling exhibition by the Australian team.
Right.
The second test was a bowling exhibition by the Indian team. And I was very impressed with the new captain who batted well and long. And I was very disappointed that the Australian batsmen just couldn't get their act together. And I'm delighted that the series are balanced now, because it makes the rest of the tests more interesting. Whereas if it was a 2-0 lead, then we'd sit back saying, well, it's just a formality. But I think the Indian team played very, very well. And their captain scored well.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Malik, so we are not discussing the last match, we are discussing this one. But I'm trying to say, look at the courage, look at the potential, look at the response from there. What is in your opinion?
I think we love making records. That's
right.
What. And the record.
And I remember you also mentioned that they come out because of the protest for the farmers.
That's right. I'll get to that. The record we made, I don't think anybody can break that. 36, the whole team out. No team in the world can do that good. Right, but I gave a humorous touch. If you recall, and you've been part of a lot of protests that you covered as a journalist, farmers in India are protesting. That again is one of the major events in India.
Yes.
Farmers are protesting, and government doesn't want to bend their ego. The major things going on all over the world, and people are protesting. So we protested here. So I gave a humorous touch to the cricket teams coming out on 36 was that they walked out in protest in support of Indian farmers at 36.
Yes. So today we almost finished the 36 days. So they are following the footstep of the former 36 days, 36 runs. Last question, Dr. Bernard, it's very serious also. ICC announced that 3 teams of era, and there is not a single player from Pakistan. Being a human activist, being a good sportsman, being a American, being Australian, Indian, how you're looking these kind of decisions?
What I have felt, Pakistan currently should deserve its best anywhere in the world because you got a great leader. There have been issues with the Pakistan because of the political situations there. I think currently you are best placed for anything you want to achieve. And if I was a Pakistani, I wouldn't care, honestly.
Right.
Let there be discrimination. You hold your head high and you win. So walk to victory.
Let me move to the senior cricketer experts enjoying the test match, enjoying the cricket. Professor Pitman, last question of the today show. Do you think that this decision, ICC did not see the Babar Azam, he is the #1 T20 player, and people knows about, rest of the world knows. How you look this decision? Not a single batsman on all 3 formats. Last question for 2 minutes only.
Actually, I saw one of the test teams for the decade. And you're right, I didn't see the other 2 forms of cricket, but I've always been a fan of Imran Khan. I thought he was one of the great bowlers I've ever seen. And if you can bring him back, I'll watch cricket anytime with Pakistan. Great cricket.
Thank you very much. You both already appreciated Pakistan because of leadership. You appreciated as a captain cricketer. Dr. Bernard appreciated as a really good leader. I believe things will be changed in Pakistan also. And then in next time, when we have the leader like Pakistan, we should not miss our team. We should not miss our player from the decade 11. I think today's show, we discussed more about how year 2020 went. Next week, we will discuss the start of the year 2021, and we would like to see how and what the expectation our experts they have, and how they would like to see the world. And then that I think that is going to be difficult for both of them. Thank you, Dr. Bernard, Malik. Thank you, Professor Pitman. We really enjoy the talks, and thanks. I think this is the last show of our year 2020. I'm personally very thankful from myself, my channel also, for your time for this discussion. Thank you, Professor Pitman. Thank you, Dr. Bernard.
May we thank the management and the great friends we have at 72 News. They've been very generous and kind. God bless them.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
It's over from Shoaib. Thank you.